Imagine a time when a single meal could mean the difference between life and death. A time when the weather, harvest, and hierarchy of your society decided whether you'd eat a hearty meal or go hungry. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where food wasn't simply a source of nourishment. It was a battle for survival, a daily challenge wrapped in superstition, faith, and hard work. Welcome back to Forgotten Tales. Today we're delving into the fascinating world of food and survival during the Middle Ages. This era, often romanticized for its knights and castles, was a time when people's diets told a story of resilience, creativity, and adaptability in a world where food was scarce and famine was always just one poor harvest away. From the grueling day-to-day of peasants surviving on bread and meager portions, to the lavish feasts enjoyed by the nobility, each meal reveals something about the society and the times. What did they eat to survive? What was considered a delicacy, and what methods did they use to preserve food for the harsh winter months? Join us as we step back in time to discover the gritty, surprising, and at times grim realities of food in medieval times. In medieval Europe, life and survival centered around food, both its presence and its absence. For most people, their diet was limited to what they could grow, gather, or trade in their region. Unlike today's global market, where fruits, grains, and spices from across the world are available in local stores, medieval people ate what was locally accessible and seasonal. Spring brought fresh greens, while summer and early autumn were the times for harvesting grains and storing supplies for the winter months ahead. In this period, the land dictated life. Weather events like an unusually cold winter, a drought, or heavy rains could turn a year of abundance into one of scarcity. To avoid such devastation, villages relied heavily on communal farming and shared resources, working collectively to survive the changing seasons. Every villager had a role in ensuring the community had enough food to last through difficult times. For the majority of people, peasants, their diet was simple, often bland and heavily reliant on whatever grains they could grow. Bread was their staple, but not the fluffy, refined loaves we might imagine. Their bread was often coarse and made with whatever grains were available, rye, barley, or oats. Wheat was considered a luxury reserved for the upper classes. To stretch their food, they would mix flour with ground beans or peas, creating dense loaves that were filling if not exactly delicious. Vegetables were crucial in the peasant diet. Cabbages, onions, leeks, turnips, and carrots were among the most common, with gardens carefully tended to supply these essentials. Meat was a rarity, often reserved for feast days or celebrations. Most peasants only ate meat a few times a year, typically during festivals when they could occasionally afford a chicken or some pork. Instead, they relied on dairy products like milk, cheese, and butter, which provided much-needed protein and fats. These diets weren't just a matter of availability, they were shaped by hard labor. Peasants spent long hours in the fields, plowing, sowing, and harvesting crops. To make it through the day, they ate filling, hearty meals, though they lacked much flavor or variety. Ale and beer were staple beverages, even for children, as water sources were often contaminated, and fermentation made these drinks safer. Beer was brewed with low alcohol content and was more of a liquid bread than a recreational drink. Food preservation was crucial for peasants, especially during the winter months. They used simple methods to stretch their resources, salting, smoking, and drying. Vegetables and grains were stored in root cellars or barrels, while meat, when available, was salted to last longer. Even so, supplies often ran short, and malnutrition was a constant threat. Diseases like scurvy, caused by a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables, and pellagra, from limited dietary variety, were common. While peasants struggled to get by, the nobility lived a life of relative abundance, enjoying a diet rich in meats, exotic spices, and extravagant dishes. A noble's feast was a spectacle, an experience meant to impress and showcase wealth. But even for the nobility, food reflected both privilege and the unpredictability of supply. Nobles had access to a wide array of meats: beef, pork, venison, rabbit, and birds like peacock, swan, and pheasant. These meats were often roasted whole and served with sauces made from vinegar, wine, and rare spices imported from far-off lands. Spices like cinnamon, pepper, ginger, and saffron were luxuries that demonstrated both wealth and status, often costing more than the meat itself. For bread, the nobility enjoyed manchet, a fine white bread made from wheat. In contrast to the rough, coarse bread of the peasants, manchet was soft and refined. Nobles also indulged in cheeses and an array of sweets made with honey, as sugar was rare and highly valued. Feasts were extravagant. Multi-course events featuring elaborate displays such as subtleties, decorative food sculptures often shaped like castles or mythical beasts. Even so, the noble diet had its own limitations. Without refrigeration, fresh produce was only available seasonally, and food spoiled quickly, especially in warmer months. They, too, preserved food through salting, smoking, and fermenting. The use of heavy spices was not just for flavor, it also masked the taste of meats that had begun to spoil. The noble diet was undoubtedly richer than the peasants', yet their food was still influenced by the limits of medieval preservation methods. In the Middle Ages, the constant threat of famine loomed over rich and poor alike. Crop failure could result from weather, pests, or disease, and it often led to devastating famine. When supplies ran out, people resorted to foraging, consuming anything remotely edible, roots, acorns, bark, and even the straw that usually fed livestock. Famine hit hardest in winter, when preserved food stores were exhausted and fresh produce was months away. During these desperate times, people practiced creative survival tactics. Villagers might gather wild greens or grind acorns into a powder that could be added to bread. Local churches and monasteries sometimes provided food for the poorest, though these resources were limited. Some communities relied on bartering, exchanging whatever they had for much-needed food. Disease was another frequent threat. Malnutrition weakened immune systems, making communities vulnerable to outbreaks of infectious diseases. This cycle of scarcity, illness, and death was common, yet people survived through adaptability and a fierce communal spirit. Food was more than just sustenance in medieval society, it held significant spiritual meaning. Christianity played a powerful role in shaping diets and traditions around food. Fasting, for example, was a regular practice, with people abstaining from certain foods on specific days and during Lent, a 40-day period when meat and dairy were off limits. These religious observances structured the year, with feast days offering brief respite from these restrictions. The church also provided charity, offering food to the poorest of the community. Monasteries often grew their own food and distributed it to those in need, especially during famines. The religious connection to food gave people a sense of stability, an anchor in times of scarcity. When we look at medieval food, we see more than just ingredients and recipes. We see the resilience of a society that found ways to endure hardships. The stark differences in diet between peasants and nobility reflected the rigid social hierarchy, yet even the wealthiest were at the mercy of nature. For most people, food was precious, a lifeline, a symbol of community, and sometimes a source of despair. Through hard work, faith, and communal support, they managed to carve out lives under harsh conditions, each meal a testament to their determination. What's one thing that surprised you about food in the Middle Ages? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation. Next on Forgotten Tales, the forgotten flavors of indigenous peoples. Join us as we explore the culinary traditions of indigenous communities and discover how their time-honored foods reveal secrets to sustainable eating practices. And as always, if you enjoyed this journey through time, hit the like button, share this video with fellow history lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode of Forgotten Tales. Until next time, remember, history is full of stories waiting to be uncovered, stories that blur the line between myth and reality.